and welcome to the Language Assessment in the Classroom course. My name is Amy Lightfoot and I work on the British Council's education projects in India. Over the next 4 weeks, we're going to talk about something that a lot of teachers find quite challenging: how we test the language ability of our students. We know from talking to teachers that many of you have not had much training in this important area. So in this course, we hope to introduce you to some practical ideas which will help you to assess your students more effectively in the classroom. So let's start by thinking about how and why a better understanding of assessment can be helpful to teachers. We've talked to some experts from the world of language assessment, and we'll be hearing about their ideas throughout this course. Here's what Nuaz Figueras and Jin Yan had to say about why assessment is important in the language classroom. As you watch, think about how their ideas compare to your own reasons for wanting to learn more about assessment.
And there's something that I would really like to highlight, especially for teachers, but also for students, the importance of bearing in mind what I call the Trinity in language education, which is learning, teaching, and assessment. Learning is at the heart of language education, but teaching is very relevant. You always need a teacher, no matter whether there's different forms of teachers. But also assessment allows you to see what you have learned. Learning doesn't happen without assessment of whatever kind you may want to think of. So I think that bearing in mind that learning, teaching and assessment go together is something that one needs to remember.
It is extremely important for teachers to know about testing, especially what we call classroom-based assessment, because assessment is part of teaching, in my view. During the process of teaching, you need to consistently incorporate assessment in classroom teaching, as well as summative assessments for midterm final exams, for example.
If a test taker or a student understands what a test is trying to measure, then it can help them a lot to prepare for that test, to be able to understand, okay, what kind of language is this test encouraging me to develop? And I think that, you know, it's useful for teachers and for learners in that sense.
I think teachers should know about teaching, right, first of all. And I think one of the basic tenets of successful teaching is setting learning goals and giving feedback, right? One of the key sort of revelations that's needed is that this is actually a dimension of assessment actually in the classroom. All moments where you are setting tasks and giving feedback are indeed the basis of assessment. So I think building from that, teachers need to develop some concepts of more formal assessment, because otherwise they potentially end up, you know, using formal tests inappropriately because they haven't understood some of the basic features of higher stakes testing. So I think they need both. They need to understand how assessment functions in the classroom and how high stakes testing or large scale testing functions to the extent that it actually impacts on what they do.
Assessment literacy for teachers is important because it can help them relate what they teach and what the students learn to the final objectives in any curriculum. In terms of assessment methods, I say assessment deliberately because many teachers talk a lot about formative assessment, but unfortunately they use tests, and some of them may use the scores on tests in what they think is formative assessment. And formative assessment goes beyond a score. It goes beyond what you did correctly into how you can go on learning and make up for what perhaps you did not do that well. That's for teachers, making them aware that, and that's something that teachers learn from day one, what they teach is not always what the students learn. And assessment is useful in that respect. It shows teachers whether the students learned what they taught.